But I just played the way I played. As I said, I was just looking for melodies, and I had a kind of unusual way of playing. I think playing that real clean sound.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you want to know about that as well, that was funny how these things come about. But I was almost forced into a clean sound, which really suited me. It was great because of the way music fashions go. Punk rock and the Sex Pistols playing this very overdriven, let's say like a Ramones kind of sound in the
Right.
US. Those short, sharp, very distorted like that. Because that had happened after punk, everyone was looking for their own thing. You guys might find this interesting in Manchester. So because we're young, quite often young people define themselves by what they're not. So if you're kind of hip in
I'm not
Manchester
them.
or probably anywhere in the UK and maybe the States, not so much the States, but 78, 79, 80, 80, 81, for guitar players, there was a whole lot of thou shalt not. So it was thou shalt not play pentatonic blues licks. Thou shalt not sound like Freebird. Thou shalt not sound like that. And it gave us, so there was a lot of, as a guitar player, you want to be modern and you want to be contemporary and cutting edge. So in my case, for me, I took this stuff very seriously. Like distortion was out, a lot of effects were out, except for Charlie Burchill from Simple Minds. He did it well. Guy from Killing Joke did it well. But there was a whole bunch of guitar players, and in my case, what all I was left with was clean, no effects, and I was the one guy playing melody in the band. And the Factory Records guys all went towards funk. So a certain ratio, you hear it in New Order's records. So obviously Nile Rodgers was real big, Niall's thing, because I want to get for people who are, aren't that, technical, but if you've got no distortion and no sustain, when you play a guitar chord, it disappears real quick unless you're going unless you're playing a lot of funk. Now, I mean, this was very deliberate on my part. Uh, there was a few bands who were doing that very well, who were on the John Peel show, and I was able to do something else. I was able to play very melodic, and I was able to play arpeggios, and I wanted my own thing. So bands like you hear it in Orange Juice and some of the postcard records where they've got this anemic, very lo-fi approach with James Brown beats because it had to be non-rock. That's the thing, non-rock, non-rock. So funk was kind of a thing, but still it had to be lo-fi. I think in the US, the closest to it would have been ESG, you know. So
Nice.
it's this minimalist, lo-fi, almost amateurish, cool thing. And so the guitar version of that, and no one was doing what I was doing. So my point being that I was left with a few sort of very only a few things left that I could do. And that I think that's a really good thing for art. I think if you've got just a few options, particularly in this day and age when you can sit in front of a laptop and you can just pull down loops, orchestras, choirs, anything you want, any kind of plugins. Back then, me as a guitar player, I was left with just a very very narrow set of options. So it made me play in a very hyperactive way, and that's where
Mhm.
this high lifey kind of King Sunny a Day thing comes from because I didn't have a whole load of echo hanging around or a load of distortion, and I was very melodic, so I was kind of just really getting busy.
Would you, was it ever a temptation to go there? I understand what you're saying because, we started off busking. So I always played like a two-piece set, a three-piece set. And then, of course, the second we got our record deal, I fucked around and got a Neil Peart set, which my
Right.
manager was like, nah, dude, like, no. Like, go back to your kick, your snare, your hi-hat, and that's it. Like,
That's
and I learned my lessons.
right. Yeah.
But were you ever tempted to like go all out and buy pedal effect boards and
Oh yeah. Oh no, I do that, but I try and do it to make it sound like my records. Like I'm really into the technology, and I really, you know, uh, I guess in the 80s there was no one was more diametrically opposed to my approach than Eddie Van Halen. There's no doubt about it. If you go, what's the most extreme opposite to what I was doing? I guess is
Hmm.
Eddie Van Halen, and and I saw Eddie Van Halen, and I watched this guy smile for 2 hours while he was playing, and look like it was the greatest thing in the world. And I was like, he's all right. And then I met him. What a beautiful guy, absolutely beautiful guy. But no one needs me to be in that area. And it was just, it's kind of a funny thing. And you know, I'd forgotten that. I almost wish that I'd remembered that when I wrote my book. Um, but I think knowing what you're about, but still hoping to surprise yourself is where I'm at. And you know, but I love technology. Oh man, pedals crazy, and um, but I've got it down now, and I think it's a whole other thing. But I think the technology is finally now. Maybe it was a number of years ago, but finally actually caught up with the musicians. I'm careful, I can spend too much of my time pressing buttons. I love programming pedals. I love it because it's.
Yeah.
I see it as programming. I see it as producing with my feet.
Yeah, I'm so happy you included your pedal board in Marr's guitars. Um, but I did notice, maybe I missed it, but I was looking for what you were using, and maybe you just omitted it because it's just simply
Too
unsexy.
obvious.
No, just it's just the rack units that you were using in the late 80s. Like you were using a rack mounted boogie, you had like a Mesa Boogie power amp, Mesa Boogie preamps, and rack effects. And
Yeah.
but you didn't include that in the book. And was it just do you not have them anymore, or just it's just they
No,
don't look as beautiful as a Fender?
that's right. It was just an aesthetic decision. I thought that if I'd done that, it would have tipped the book slightly too much into the realm of this book is for musicians because
Right.
what I try to find the balance with that book was that I wanted it to be yes for musicians, but I thought it would be a neat trick to pull off if people who weren't musicians had it next to Zen gardens in their house. I want for that
Yeah.
book, if I'm being honest, to be a little bit like the Trojan horse. That's the book. I'm trying to. That's my way of getting guitars into people's houses who would not normally have a guitar book.